The urban environment, in addition to creating comfortable conditions for physical living, should include facilities that meet the spiritual needs of people. These are not only historical buildings, but also buildings that meet the trends and style of our time. A popular connecting element of detached buildings is an above-ground passage. Initially, such a crossing can be considered a kind of bridge, open or closed. There are transitions planned at the project stage, but there are also transitions that need to be built to combine buildings of different styles and construction time. Turning to the history of urban planning, it can be noted that the above-ground structures uniting are quite common in architectural ensembles and residential buildings of European and Russian cities. When designing a transition between buildings, it is necessary to take into account various factors, for example, the condition of buildings and the specifics of the premises that are subject to reconstruction or dismantling, the load that the transition itself will bear, etc. In the photos, you can see different versions of the above-ground crossings. Above-ground crossings in Russian regions are usually very different from crossings in metropolitan cities. This is due to several reasons. First of all, this is the uniqueness of the capital's buildings, which must be connected by passages. These buildings are often larger than in the region, and, as a result, with more solid financing. In addition, the number and quality of contractors in the capitals exceeds the capabilities of builders in the regions. The financial capabilities of regional authorities and private customers are much more modest. Here, rather than prestigious, but utilitarian goals come to the fore. Nevertheless, there is a desire in the regions to build a transition not only for functional purposes, but also to meet the aesthetic and emotional needs of people. Great attention is also paid to variant design. For example, 3 crossings built in Soviet times in the Sanatorium Marino of the Rylsky district have the maximum glazing for wooden bindings, which creates picturesque views from the transition to the surrounding park. The same single supports with a pitch of 6 meters support the transition to the Nightingale Dons Sanatorium on Cherniakovsky Street and the transition between hospital buildings on Pyrogov Street in the city of Kursk. The transition between the main academic building and the dormitory of the Kursk State Agrarian University on K. Mark Street is very tactfully integrated into the surrounding development. The 3-part division of the transition is very organically combined with the architecture of both buildings, one of which is an architectural monument. Despite the massiveness of the supports, the passage not only unites these buildings into one ensemble, but also, thanks to large windows and openings with gates, creates a visual connection between K. Mark Street and the green space of the university campus. One of the first multifunctional buildings in Kursk in the late 1990s was the shopping and entertainment complex of Grin Corporation, built opposite the central market on Dzerzhinsky Street. Since traffic in this area is very intense, in 2006 the city authorities decided to build an overpass across Dzerzhinsky Street in the central market area. It was not profitable to build an underground passage due to the large number of underground communications and low relief in the area of the Kor River, which by that time had already been laid in pipes. It was decided to design a 2-span crossing with the expansion of the roadway for bus stops. The walls in the passage were made of glass, the roof was made of polycarbonate. There is a decorative arch above the central 30-meter span, creating visual stability of the entire structure. In 2007, a transition was built from the second floor of the main building of the Institute of Cooperation on Radishchev Street to the first floor of the second building with the organization of a vestibule. The light and wide passage is also supported by single columns. All transitions between buildings were designed to be heated, so the walls were made mainly of brick or expanded clay blocks, with window openings. The exception is the passages of the Marino Sanatorium, where the frame is filled with wooden window blocks. Pedestrian crossings across streets are usually built unheated and in lighter enclosing structures. In recent years, many crossings of busy highways and railways have appeared in the Kursk region. These crossings are usually cold, their design solutions are different, rather economical, but equipping them with escalators for small flows of people is impractical. Lifts are provided for people with limited mobility. The above-ground crossing can become a striking element that will bring a modern stylistic orientation to regional architecture. This applies to ancient cities with more than 1,000 years of history, such as Kursk, where buildings of various styles coexist, literally wall to wall, from the 17th century to high-tech. Kursk State University includes a number of detached academic buildings facing Radishchev Street with their facades. The main building of KSU is based on the building of the former Mariinsky Girls' Gymnasium, built in 1901 to 1903. The author of the eclectic building project and the head of construction was civil engineer A. Baumiller. For the construction of the gymnasium, the architect of the project was promoted to the rank of a full state councillor. The main building has been expanded and completed since the Soviet period, and one of the extensions has an above-ground passage from one block to another. After the commissioning of the new modern building, a proposal was put forward to stylistically and structurally connect the main building with the newest one in a similar way to the existing one. The architectural appearance of the building includes various elements of classical and Art Nouveau style, quite elegantly intertwined in the aesthetics of the facade. Later, 2 more floors were added. The university developed, the number of students increased, the opening of new specialties required the construction of additional buildings, which were erected at different times. We had to build unifying elements for the buildings in the form of above-ground crossings. The original project envisaged a 2-story 3-span above-ground passage from the new building to the main building of KSU above Kirov Street. The transition was not implemented for several reasons, the main one being the impossibility of laying many underground utility networks under the sidewalks of Kirov Street due to the presence of intermediate supports in the project at the crossing. It was necessary to redesign the above-ground crossing in the new realities. In the process of research, the development team adopted a number of fundamental design and spatial planning solutions that significantly distinguish the new project from the original one. Firstly, the replacement of a multi-span beam structure with a single-span one, without intermediate supports. Secondly, the narrowing of the transition to the minimum required width and the cancellation of some educational facilities and recreation areas adjacent to the longitudinal corridors, which allows the redevelopment of the main building with minimal reconstruction. Thirdly, the rejection of a 2-story transition scheme in favor of a single-story one. Fourthly, the various points of connection of the transition to both buildings, the variability of pedestrian flows and reconstruction activities both in the main building and in the new one were considered. Sketchy searches have identified 4 options for space planning solutions. The analysis of the presented variants of the above-ground crossing projects for KSU buildings is presented in Table 2. The technical and economic aspects of the project were also reviewed and carefully studied, Table 3. Based on the results of discussions, the development team selected project number 1. The main advantage that influenced the choice of the option is the simplicity of the design and technology of construction, the possibility of carrying out construction work without stopping the educational process. Currently, a large number of above-ground crossings have been created in Kursk and the Kursk region, reflecting the main trends in design. Projects of above-ground crossings between buildings are an important architectural element in the concept of creating a comfortable environment for human activity in the region, both from the standpoint of ease of movement and from the point of view of aestheticizing space. One example is the project of a warm above-ground passage between the buildings of KSU above Kirov Street in Kursk, considered in more detail.